Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Free Thought Hour. So, first of all, let me introduce Tercia, my co-host from South Africa. Tercia, how the devil are you?
I am very well, thank you. Very well, not very good, as one of your children said earlier. We do have load shedding, but I'm in my husband's office and he has an inverter. So I'm well, thank you. Do you still have to introduce me, though? Has it been a year since I've been co-host? It's been longer, has it?
Well, I'd have to look back through the archive. Stop asking me difficult questions. It seems like a long time. You're fully established. You're a fixture.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but let's just go with it. It's nice to be here. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you, John, as always.
Wonderful, indeed. Likewise. So let's introduce our guest tonight, who is Kenneth Krause. Kenneth, how the devil are you? And can I call you Ken?
Yeah, please. Yeah, Ken and Sagan, by the way.
Oh. I have one too. I have four. I have 4 kitty cats, but mine. Wait, come here, Mort. Come. This is mine. One of mine. This is Mort.
Oh, pretty.
Yeah, she's a pretty lady. She's but so is Sagan male, I presume?
No, she's a girl.
Okay. Well, shows with cats are popular. So hello.
She's pretty.
So do you have one called Carl then to go with Sagan?
Yes, she was named after Carl, actually. It took us quite a while. She's a shelter cat, and it took us quite a while to find a name for her. We've had her like 9 years now, but finally decided Sagan was the name for her.
Well, you'll appreciate all four of mine are one is a shelter cat, and the other 3 are strays that I actually caught as little kittens on the streets. They were ferals,
and they're happy cats now.
Well, I don't know. They're a handful, and my latest one, Picasso, was actually hand raised. My dad found her and her siblings. All 3 of them fit onto the palm of my one hand, and I don't have really big hands. And I bottle fed them, so she's a little bit confused. She does not know that she's a cat. It's quite a challenge to have one of those. So I've got 4, and 3 of the 4 are ferals that I raised from the street, and 1 is a shelter. So I've done my duty for society.
Yes, you have, and thank you very much.
I love my kitty cats.
I love my kitty cat.
Yeah.
And that is the end of the cat show.
Okay, well, let's get on to more boring things.
So how is everyone? How is everything in South Africa?
Well, let me begin by saying that we have this thing called load shedding, which is an euphemism for power cuts. But I'm in my husband's office, and he has an inverter and a battery. So I have internet, and I have a little bit of light. That's why it's so dark behind me. But, South Africa is an interesting place. I wanted to ask you about your surname, because the way you spell it, is it German? We pronounce it Krause, which is an Afrikaans surname. Is there a connection?
In fact, when I was in the military, I was sent to Germany, and that's what I was called by the natives there, was Krause.
Yeah.
Kenneth Krause.
Yeah.
And it is very German, yes.
Yeah, and of course, South Africa has a very large not German population anymore, but many of our surnames are of German origin. I mean, we're an immigrant country as well. I presume, I thought you were in the UK, but you sound American.
Oh, very American, yeah. Actually,
okay.
my grandparents are actually from Ipswich, John.
Oh, right.
At least one of them, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And his wife, my grandmother, I believe she's Irish.
Uh-huh. You're on the West Coast, aren't you? You're in. Is it?
No. Well, I'm on the West Coast of Wisconsin, in the Driftless region. Yes.
I remember that.
Right on the Mississippi River.
Yeah. Mm.
And it seems it's hot. If I look at your attire, it must be hot and humid.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just got off the bike. It's like 95 degrees here.
Wow.
Okay,
And
what is that in Celsius? What is that in the in proper terms?
pardon me?
30.
Oh,
30.
it'd be about 38, I think, is Celsius.
Yeah, yeah. It's
About
and the
38.
humidity is what? It must be close to 80%, 90% humidity.
It's not so bad this time around. We had a heat wave maybe 3 weeks ago where it was terrible, and I was actually cycling in 102 degree, probably 39 degree
Yeah.
heat. And that was something terrible, but not so bad today because it isn't so humid this time in September.
Okay.
Good.
Well, we've had our second cold spell for the spring, so I'm still wrapped up and it's still cold, but I prefer the cold to the heat any day. But tell me, talk about heat and climate and I always mostly I come into our conversations and I'm fairly unprepared because I like to just pick at our guests like I would at a very much caked ball of yarn. I'm a crocheter as well. So you're in this in Wisconsin is in the south, south of America. Not north, east, well west.
It is.
So
It's in the upper Midwest. It's close enough to Canada to if you're up in northern Wisconsin, you can throw a rock across Lake Michigan if you can throw that far. And I'm kidding, you can't throw that far. But it's right across the lake from Canada.
Yeah.
Actually northern Minnesota, but
those lakes are small seas, really, aren't
yes, well, especially Lake Michigan. Yeah.
they? Yeah.
So I want to. You're an editor, so we were speaking, John and I, about the difference between editors and language teachers. We're not quite as picky as editors are. I'm an English language teacher, but I'm not quite as picky as an editor. My partner, my business partner, used to be an editor, and I know what you guys can be like. So you have edited and written for the Skeptic Inquirer. Am I right? Can you talk
Well,
to us about that?
the job of editor and the job of contributing editor are two very different things. There
Ah,
have been occasions when I've been asked to edit other people's work. When the editor had come across, say, an article on paleoanthropology, and he thought maybe I was up to speed on that particular topic. But generally, I didn't do a lot of editing. Mostly, I just did writing, and for the Skeptical Inquirer and for the Humanist. And sometimes a great deal of writing for Skeptic as well.
I was looking at one of your articles earlier.
Oh, which one?
I'm trying to bring it up on screen.
I
About
was lucky enough to have to do the cover
Yeah.
a couple of times. And
ah,
here's one on biological race and human diversity.
Mm.
That turned out to be a 9 or 10-page article, which is extended in that business. And also the Homo floresiensis discovery. I did a cover article on that as well.
fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
well, John, can I brag a little bit? Uh, I at almost 51, I had my first article published in the online Skeptic Inquirer just 2 weeks ago about my undercover experience with an African traditional healer. So it's under the title I'm a skeptic. I think that's what it was called, and it seems to have been quite not too bad. So it took me the best part of 50 years to get anything published. But so what is your field of speciality besides writing, which I don't know if writing is a field of speciality or whether that's just something one does. Do you have any particular field of interest?
Well, I think I was a little bit younger when I started writing than 50. Well, I'm almost 60 now. But I don't recall how old I was when I started writing. I was certainly in my 40s, I believe. and I should say writing for publication. Of course, in law school, I had to do a lot of writing. In college, I was a history major. I had to do a lot of writing, but never for publication. I think it may have been the Skeptical Inquirer was, like you, the first one I've ever published in.
Okay, so there's hope for me.
Oh, well, the sky's the limit, right?
Let's see. Okay, so you mentioned law school and history. Did you qualify as a lawyer, or what are they called in the States? I know, John, in the UK, you have solicitors and barristers, and I don't know what the difference is.
Well, a solicitor deals with law that often doesn't involve going to court and representing anybody, whereas a barrister only represents in court a customer who he thinks he can defend or prosecute.
Okay.
In the United States, we have solicitors. They do mostly appellate work for the government. They work beneath the Attorney General, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll see them arguing before the Supreme Court on occasion.
So and it doesn't it. Who has to pass the bar exam in America? Is it attorneys or both attorneys and solicitors?
Solicitors are attorneys. Everyone has to pass a bar exam in order to practice law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you pass the bar exam?
In a couple of states, yes.
Wow.
Every bar exam is a state thing, so you have to do it in a particular state. And I've been a lawyer in 2 different states, so I had to pass the New Mexico bar exam first, and then the Wisconsin bar exam after that.
So do you still practice law, or
I do not. I do not, and I will not.
Why not?
Oh, it's boring. It's boring as hell.
So how did you migrate from humanities and law into skepticism, which is, looking at some of your articles, is mostly scientific? And I'd like you to tell us a bit about Homo florensis too, the Hobbit, because obviously you've thoroughly researched that to produce a 9-page article.
Yeah, quite. What was your first question?
How did you?
Oh, how did I go from law to science?
Or history to science? Yeah.
Well, the transition from history as an undergraduate to law was sort of natural. I mean, it's really sort of in that vein. But you'd be surprised, John, how similar a judicial opinion, for example, as a Supreme Court opinion, is to a scientific study. Just in structure alone, it's almost identical in some ways. You have an abstract, you have an introduction, you have you have a methods section, you have a limitations section. It may not be designated as such, but you'll find exactly those sorts of things in a judicial opinion. It's very much an easy transition from law to science. When they say that you're trained to think like a lawyer, what they really mean is you're trained to think not so much as a scientist as a profession, but as you're trained to think scientifically.
Because scientists examine evidence, and that's exactly that's exactly what lawyers do. Except that perhaps lawyers don't always go where the evidence leads. I would propose, I would be very brave, and I would say that sometimes I get the impression that lawyers don't go where the evidence leads. They try to go the opposite direction. But to go the opposite direction of the evidence, you still need to know where the evidence leads, because you don't want the guys to go where the evidence leads.
Well, let me tell you one thing about lawyers, and it'll actually be a good thing, and maybe no one will like that. But no competent lawyer ever walks into a courtroom without knowing both sides of the cases up and down, or all sides of the cases. It's not that, yes, we have to represent a particular side, but we know every side when we go in.
I mean, you have to.
You should.
Absolutely. So did you present people in criminal cases, or did you not do that ever at all?
Yes, I did.
And this is something that whenever I meet a lawyer, especially one who's not practicing law anymore, I ask them this. We have a family friend. He's my dad's age, in his 70s, and he stopped practicing law many years ago because he said that he could not represent people whom he knew were guilty. He didn't feel that it was morally right. That was his choice, and how does one do that? I mean, you have to represent this person because they're paying you. How does one do that when you know that this person is guilty of the crime?
One word: the government.
Yeah. Well, my lawyer friend, who I meet up with for a pub lunch once a week, he says you don't have to take a case if you don't think there's much chance of getting a good result out of it.
Yeah.
But you have to be in the lucky position of being an independent lawyer, not somebody who is assigned as the prosecution or the defendant from the bank of lawyers that are required to work to instructions.
Well, a lawyer doesn't. We never ask. A good lawyer will never ask the defendant, his client, whether or not she's guilty.
No.
We don't care. We don't care if you're innocent or guilty. We just want you to have a fair trial. We want to get you off. Yes, but we want to counter every power that the government has over you, and to make sure that all your rights are observed, and that you get the best defense possible. Whether we win or lose in the end, it doesn't matter as long as we've done our job. And as long as you, the client, the defendant, are given all of your rights.
That
But there's a horrible thing here, isn't there? In the case, turn on some more echo cancellation. In the case of legal fees not being available, and the government has to provide a representative out of the taxes, then you have to do what is required for that job. But if you're an independent lawyer, you can pick and choose whether you want to take the work or not.
Sure.
Yeah, but I want to move away from law and just get back to the Hobbit. Is Homo florensis?
Homo floresiensis. Yeah, it was
Floresiensis. Yes.
This was a specimen. They called it LB1 because it was found in Liang Bua Cave on the island of Flores in Indonesia. And this has been a long time ago since I've written about it, so please don't ask me a lot of questions about it. But and this hobbit was maybe 3.5 feet tall, something like that. Had a brain case that was a few hundred cubic centimeters in volume, whereas we have something like 300 or 1,350, and a Neanderthal is something less than that. So they're very diminutive creatures, and there was a big controversy over the whole thing. This thing happened, I believe it was discovered in 2003, and the papers started coming real fast because there was a controversy about whether this creature was a genuinely different species of Homo, or whether it was a diseased Homo erectus. Something that the pro group wanted it to be and it turned out they were right, I believe. A different species that became smaller due to what they call the island effect. You know, when you're on an island without predators, you naturally evolve to be smaller to save resources. And that was their theory. The other theory was that this was Homo erectus that had suffered one of 2 or 3 different diseases, depending on who you talk to at the time. Microencephaly was one of them, literally small brain. And the other one was cretinism, which I'm not sure exactly how that worked anymore. But these two groups battled one another viciously, just viciously in the professional literature.
Do you have a snoring cat?
Pardon me?
Do you have a snoring cat?
No, she's digging He's digging in some box over there, trying to be a
There's
bad
some
kid.
weird noises. Really weird noises.
I don't think so. I don't know.
How up to speed are you, Kenneth, on Homo naledi, the discovery in South Africa?
I've read a little bit about it, but I've probably forgotten most about it because I just wasn't interested in pursuing it personally. But it's an interesting case, as I recall. But I'm not up to speed. I haven't read the studies on it, so I would hesitate to talk about it too much.
It's phenomenally interesting that the recent research has actually shown that there's a very big possibility that they actually practiced burial rituals 200 to 300,000 years ago, and that they were able to use fire, and there are signs in the cave of pictographs that they actually yeah, that is actually quite a thing. I think there's enough evidence. So yeah.
And what they're saying was that was one of the earliest species, perhaps, that had accomplished those things.
It seems like it. Well, it wasn't expected that species that early would be able to engage in that ritualistic behavior, because initially they thought that they just threw the corpses down this chute in this cave, but they've discovered that they were actually buried and that they were rituals, and they've discovered this tiny child fossil with a stone tool in its hand. It's sort of in a fetal position, and the hand's like this, and then this stone tool is deliberately put into the hand. Yeah, just the use of stone tools and the pictographs, and that's quite amazing. So this Homo, the tiny one, the Hobbit, was this the same island where they discovered the tiny little elephants?
Yes, indeed.
Well,
again, the island effect affected the fauna on the island of Flores as much as it affected LB1, and however many of those there existed at the time.
Did you visit the site at
No.
all? Have you ever?
No. I visited the scientific literature, and quite often. It was one of those articles, Tercia, that you step into it as the writer without being able to access any secondary material. There were no books published at the time on Homo floresiensis. It's an interesting experience as a sort of layperson or a person who is trained in another discipline. You really have to jump right into the studies, and you have to learn to read them. You have to learn the language. You have to learn everything all at once, and you have to do it in a very quick way before you start writing on it, because obviously someone will challenge you if you're wrong. So, in a lot of cases, you get to write about stuff, and you get to read, like the race article that I wrote. Tons of secondary material dating back to the 1940s. All sorts of anthropologists have published books on the subject well before I wrote that article, and I was able to consult that before I got into the studies on that, and that made it a little bit easier. But when you're studying something and you have to jump into these studies, and it's not your specialty, it's a very different experience, but a rewarding one.
Well, we've lost Tercia for the moment. Oh, she's back on her phone this time. So before Tercia gets back grilling you on early species of Homo, I'd like to revisit lawyer and science for a bit, because I get involved in conversations online with people who think that they can justify their belief system on the same framework as the lawyer strategy that you were talking about. And I tell them that, in my view, the existence or otherwise of whatever deity they favor is not a legal question, it's a scientific question. And in my mind, the difference is when you're arguing, when you're advocating for a legal resolution, what you're doing is re-examining something historic. Whereas in the case of a scientist, it's a future thing. You can go forward and set up investigations and repeat them and repeat them. You're not stuck, unable to revisit the case like a lawyer or anybody involved in the judiciary is. So for that reason, I like to say that the scientific substantiation strategy is better than the legal one, because we can re-examine the proposition, whatever it is, time and time again. Other people can do it too. And a detective or a lawyer can't do that concerning an incident which is in the past. And this means that laws are, the judicial system sometimes goes wrong. And we've just had a case with a poor gentleman, what was his name? Malkinson, who's just been released after 17 years in prison. And his case has been he's been exonerated. He wasn't guilty, but belatedly, he's had 17 years of sanction against him, lost all that period of his life. And that's because the attempt to come to a resolution in legal terms is less efficient than in scientific process.
Well, you only get one shot in the law, don't you?
Exactly.
You only get one shot, because you're talking about a human being. You're not talking about an idea. You're not talking about how science tends to build upon itself and come to absolutely no conclusion, because that's not what science does. Science isn't interested in conclusions. It's interested in the process of getting better. It is a naturally progressive pursuit. And really, that's what the Enlightenment is all about, isn't it? Is about progress.
Yeah.
Which is maybe what concerns me most about some of the things that are going on today, that they're very anti-enlightenment and very anti-progress, even though the people who call themselves progressives, oddly enough, are in favor of this anti-enlightenment attitude. But yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. You only get one shot in the law, and if you get it wrong, then you have to. It's very difficult to go back and exonerate someone, as you say. It can be done, but it's very difficult.
Yeah. So we even had a minister of the Crown not very long ago who took on board this anti-establishment to extreme mindset that you've just referred to, and he publicly said, "We've had enough of experts. We don't want any experts." Honestly, that's how stupid.
How modern.
Yes.
How today.
Well, there you go. He got roundly denigrated for that. But you're right. What we are into now is hyper skepticism, to the extent of trying to poke down well-established knowledge in this what do they call it, conspiracy theoristic way.
Well, I believe it's an offshoot of deconstructionism and postmodernism. I think that what a lot of people refer to as woke, and I don't like that term because it's not very descriptive. It tells us absolutely nothing about what's going on. But the people who are running that show, whatever it is, are expressly anti-enlightenment and anti-science. In fact, wasn't it Ibram X. Kendi who said we should have a constitutional amendment insisting that evidence of any racial disparity, and I use the word race in quotes because there's no such thing, any racial disparity should be taken as conclusive evidence of racism. That's ridiculous. That's anti-science. What it means is that you're shutting off all inquiry, that you can't ask any questions. You can't posit any other theories or hypotheses. You just have to take it as this because it's a constitutional amendment. And I think who was it? D'Angelo. Didn't she say that anyone who argues against white fragility only proves white fragility? So in other words, no argument, no hypotheses, no evidence. We just take it because D'Angelo said we take it that way. That's anti-enlightenment. That's anti-science.
Authoritarianism. Yeah.
It's interesting, this idea of hyper-skepticism. I found myself in this week talking to somebody who, whatever, I would mention that I watched a documentary on such and such a topic, and this person would be saying, yes, but those people are just people who how do you, and would flatly say, why do you trust them, and why do you believe them? And I always find that it takes a lot of time, and it's really hard for me to explain to that person why so and so who have spent such and such time on researching this particular topic, whatever it might be, whether it is coups or race or critical race theory or cellular biology. Yes, they might be wrong about things, but they still are they have more expertise than I have. And because we live in a world where there's so much to know, we can't all be experts. So you have to come to a point where you have to trust the experts. And I think that is where it's important to strive to having a scientific literate population who know when to stop being hyper skeptic and say, look, this is where we have to trust the experts until such time as there's new evidence. And your cat is named after Carl Sagan. That's what he says in Science is a Candle in the Dark.
Indeed, yeah. I would say yes, like in areas like climate change, I trust the experts because I'm not going to do that work. That's a lot of work. I do a lot of reading. In fact, why don't we, if we can, some books that I've been reading. This is Joseph Rahm's Climate Change, What Everyone Needs to Know, an excellent book. If you want the studies, this thing has like 5 or 6 different studies referenced every page. An excellent book to read. Greta, I'm also reading Greta Thunberg's. You know Greta.
Oh yeah.
Greta. Unfortunately, Greta will always be haunted by her speech. I believe it was at the UN where she sort of lost control and she said, "How dare you?" and she started crying and all of that. But I'll tell you what, even though she's only 20 years old now, she's got a pretty good handle on this stuff. And this is an anthology. It's not just her. And it's a very good anthology. Lots of experts there. And as Tercia says, you've got to trust the experts when you're not willing to do the work. If you're not willing to do the work, let the scientists do what they do. But don't trust the experts so much. Trust the process instead. The experts, don't get into celebritism, because celebritism at any level is the wrong way to go about things. Trust the process instead. And if the scientists are observing the correct process, then you're going to get the right result.
And they're likely to be getting independent corroboration from people in different parts of the world, different areas of expertise, and coming up with consistent results. So, and that doesn't happen with conspiracy theorism.
Yes, no, it doesn't. Yeah, indeed. If you're going to discuss scientific topics, and I don't think everyone should. I really don't. If you're not willing to do a lot of the work, then you probably should just stay out of it. People who come to the debate, if there still is a debate on human evolution, for example, and they come to it from a religious point of view, they're not coming to it from an honest perspective. They're coming to it with a bias, and that's not how we do things. That's not the truth. It's disrespectful, really. It's childish.
Yeah. So I'm trying to write a banner for Greta Thunberg's book. There we go. Oh, from capital H.
I would also like to. I have no interest in these publishers or these authors of these books. I have no personal interest, by the way. But I do love books, and I think they're important. This was one of the best books. Elizabeth Colbert, what a great writer. She has an ethereal way of presenting facts and ideas. She is clear-minded. She uses facts with great facility. She's one of the best writers I think we've ever had. And this is Under a White Sky, the nature of the future. She goes through some of the stuff that we're doing to counteract climate change and the mistakes we're making and the problems we're finding trying to deal with climate change. It's very enlightening. Great book.
We had a South African chap a while back to discuss climate change. He's quite a vehement denier of anthropogenic climate change. So he acknowledges that there is such a thing as climate change, but he proposes that our human actions have nothing to do with it. And it was quite challenging for me to talk to him and to people who have that view, because there's so much to know, and the devil is in the details.
It really is, yeah.
And I think I agree with you that there are certain topics that us mere mortals perhaps should rather just don't go there, because we simply don't know enough of the details, and we just don't have the understanding to begin to engage with somebody who perhaps knows a little bit more about certain things. And do you think there's ever a time when it's better to say, listen, I don't know enough, I don't think you know enough, let me rather not tread on this topic, because I might be confusing somebody who's listening to me and I might be going in the wrong direction. Let's just talk about the weather. No pun intended.
I do it all the time, Tercia, and I think that is the responsible position. I do like to read. I do like to get informed to a certain extent, just because I have an interest in a wide variety of topics. But I don't opine about things that I don't know anything about. I don't generally opine about climate change. I do, however, know certain things, and I know that if you've ever seen, the sort of hockey stick graph of carbon emissions that occurred after 1950. I mean, I think that your friend might have a difficult time explaining that. And I'd also wonder where he's coming from. I mean, why is he so interested in suggesting that there is no such thing as anthropogenic climate change? Does he have some sort of axe to grind? Because when you've got 97% of the scientists from all these different fields coming down on the same conclusion, which is anthropogenic climate change, I wonder, well, how is he ignoring all of that science?
Well,
how does he justify that?
I can tell you. Whoa! What's the matter with my microphone tonight? I can tell you one possible explanation from some people who are anti-anthropogenic climate change, because it tends to go with fundamentalist religious people quite a lot, and I think they don't like the idea of humble man having such power over the planet as to actually change the climate. They think that's the preserve of their God, who is benevolent and wouldn't do anything to harm us. And so this is challenging to them, because it doesn't fit with their belief system.
That may very well be true for some people, and you're right. There is a correlation between people who have religious issues and people who have climate change issues, and a lot of conspiracy theory issues. It's weird, frankly.
Yes.
But I also think that there's another group, and this is a much larger group, who denies anthropogenic climate change, and these are people who just don't want to change. They don't want to stop buying their boats. They don't want to stop flying for the heck of it. They don't want to stop taking cruises. They don't want to. They want another boat. They want a bigger house. They want to keep eating cow. You know, they just don't want to change. And there's some process going on in their mind that's saying, well, I don't want to do this, so I guess I don't want to believe this either.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like people who smoke, and they keep on smoking because they know what the detrimental effects are. My son smokes. He's 21 and he started smoking at 20, and he knows exactly how bad it is, and he just there's something wrong in the way he does the cost benefit calculation, and because we are such primal beings, and I think we tend to forget that. And I mean, I had cow tonight. I had a beautiful piece of steak. So I can identify with my son and him not wanting to quit smoking, because we tend to focus on the short-term feel-good effect, and it feels good to eat that piece of steak, you know, and we tend to find it very difficult to live with that cognitive dissonance of I shouldn't be doing this, and then we rationalize it by saying, well, if I don't eat the steak, I mean, somebody else is still going to eat it, so what the hell, let me just enjoy the steak, you know. It literally is like that. And I've often thought about things like plastic use, for example. You know, I sometimes feel this existential dread when I see the plastic bags all over my environment, and I know where it's going, and yet I still use the plastic bags myself. I try to limit it, and then one gets this feeling of anxiety in many cases, but then you fall back on, well, I can't make a difference. But the problem is, if you have 5 million people and all of them feel the anxiety, but then they fall back and say, I can't make a difference, then nobody makes a difference. But if 2.5 million people say, I can make a difference, and they do it, you know, it's...
Well, we're short-lived creatures, and if something isn't able to happen, if progress can't be made in our lifetimes, we don't want any part of it because we can't see the results. But that's the wrong way to look at it, of course. We have to be more patient. We have to realize that ideas take time. Let's say a democracy, let's say in the United States, isn't working very well. Well, changes have to be made, but they don't necessarily have to be made in my lifetime. We can start talking about it, though, can't we? Yes, and we should, I think. Same thing with climate change. And by the way, I was a smoker for 15 years, and I know exactly how your son feels. It is very difficult to stop smoking.
How did you stop smoking? I
Pardon me?
want to ask you. I saw a debate between Jordan Peterson and Matt Delahanty, where Jordan Peterson said that God, only religious people can stop smoking with the help of God. Well, that's basically, it's not exactly like that. So did God help you to stop smoking?
Not that I know of. If he did, I guess I should fall on my knees and pray. But actually, it was just a lot of hard work. And believe me, it is hard work. But the benefits, there's just so many benefits, I couldn't even begin to list them. But back to climate change, if I could, for a second. What was I going to say about that? One of the biggest reasons why people don't want to accept climate change or accept that it's going to happen in their grandchildren's life or whatever like this is because we like to reproduce, don't we? Like every other species, we like to reproduce. And if you're going to suggest one underlying cause of anthropogenic climate change, it is overpopulation and overconsumption, mindless consumption. And of course, reproduction is reproduction of more mindless consumers. And people, look, again, we're animals. We don't want to stop reproducing. We don't want to be told that we can have but one child. We don't want to be told that it's better for the world if we don't reproduce, because we as parents, we think we're so good and beneficent as parents that we don't want to accept that maybe there's something else going on that we shouldn't be too proud of.
Except that recent history shows us that in Europe and in Japan, the populations are diminishing. Certainly the resident, not the immigration aspect of it, but the resident population is not replacing itself.
I hope you're right. I hope that continues to be the case. But of course, if we're already overpopulated, the fact that we're not continuing to overpopulate at the same rate is sort of irrelevant. We need to depopulate, not just slow down our continued overpopulation.
Yeah, and right, that's a problem, because if you stop producing so many young people, your population is going to be skewed towards old people who need more care. And if you don't have enough young people to look after the old people, then you need to have immigrants come and do it for you.
Well, we're going to have immigrants. We're going to have immigrants whether we like it or not, John, because as the coasts become inundated with ocean water, where are those people going to go? There's going to be some problems there, and some bigger problems perhaps than some people are guessing. When people are immigrating, say, to the Midwest of the United States, there are going to be problems because they can no longer live on the coasts. Everything from just hatred and nastiness to war, actually, to actual war.
Well, we've got to share this world out fairly, I'm afraid, because there's only one of it, and at the moment there's haves and have-nots, and that's going to cause a grievance, and as you say, a dispute.
Indeed.
Okay, and on that positive note, where shall we ask Putin to drop the atomic bomb?
Wow.
China is forecast.
Is that a question? I don't know.
China is forecast to lose almost half of its people by 2100, plunging from more than 1.4 billion to 771 million inhabitants. How about that?
I hope so. And I hope many other continents besides Southern Asia and Eastern Asia follow that suit, because we need to do something that's actually going to work. I don't think technology is really going to get us out of here without some really bad things happening first. If we're going to be responsible as a species, we need to, as consumers, we need to take responsibility for what we buy and how we spend our money. And as democratic citizens in a democracy, we have to take responsibility for our education so we can actually elect people who are going to do the right thing for a change. We need to educate ourselves.
The difficulty there is, how do you separate the politician's personal ambition for self-betterment from his attitude towards the improvement of the nation?
Well, that's a very difficult thing, but it's an easy answer, and that is to educate the voting public. Whether we tend to think in America that our form of democracy is the only possible form of democracy, whereas every citizen spills its vote onto a piece of paper every 4 years or 6 years or 2 years, whatever it is. And that's just how it is, and there's no other way to do it. Well, there are other ways to do it, and there are other ways to ensure that voters who are chosen from the people will be educated. We just haven't gotten there yet. We haven't started talking about that yet. That idea has not reached the public yet, but it needs to.
So we're blaming
and say something about American politics and the former president, number 45, and what the climate is like, the political climate is like in the United States. I know we're not a political show, John, but I've been following the news and I'm always curious.
Well, yeah, the fact that Donald Trump is still in the media, says something about the media. But of course, every time you talk about the media, what you're really talking about are people's preferences for media. Donald Trump is popular because the people want him to be popular.
Yeah.
In any democracy, I don't care if it's a representative democracy or not, in any free market economy, every problem is ultimately traceable to the people. That's just demand. Demand creates supply, and we have a supply, as Tercia indicates, of really bad politicians, and Donald Trump should tell us that it's time to change. It's time to make some really big changes in our democracy, and I hope maybe he serves as a lesson in the end.
I don't think his concerns are more about success for him.
Of course he is, and that's our fault. Not my fault in particular, because I would never vote for him, and not the fault of really anyone I know, I assume. But it is our fault as a people. We're not educating our people, and we're not doing what we need to do to make the polity a group of people who can choose responsible leaders. We are an irresponsible votership.
Yeah, I think part of the problem, because this never used to be the case to the extent that it is today. If you go back to Victorian times, when the media consisted of newspapers and not much else, and they were only available to really the better off members of society, and those were the people who took an interest in government and actually voted. But now we've moved on, and the media is everywhere. I mean, we have a channel, for example, so it's a common thing nowadays, and it's democratic to allow everybody to have their own show, but there's no selectivity about it. We can all put on a show like, I don't know, the Kardashians, which is, it's not conducive to improving society. It's
quite the opposite, isn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, standards, right? I mean, that's what you're talking about, are intellectual and ethical standards.
Yeah.
And pop culture is the opposite of standards. It is the abolition of all standards.
I want to ask, talking about the media, have you written anything on artificial intelligence, Kenneth?
No, because, I have
not. Do you have, well, I suppose you do have an opinion. Do you feel intelligence is going to have, what is the effect of artificial intelligence going to be like? I listened to a conversation with Sam Harris, and I don't remember who it was, quite recent conversation. And the gist of it was that AI has already broken the internet. It's like a double-edged sword, because it's very difficult to distinguish between what is a real person and what is a bot, and what AI can do. So, and what he means by broken the internet is that it's just become so difficult to distinguish reality from non-reality, and and that is a question that
here's my solution. Here's my solution. Read books. Forget the internet. Forget the internet. Read something that's been through the vetting process.
Yes.
The combination, to answer your question as quickly as I can, Tercia, out of respect. The problem with AI is the same problem with everything when it's mixed with consumerism. If it's mixed with consumerism, then you get any result, and mixed with pop culture, you get any possible result, because there are no standards. And if there are no standards, then forget it. And if you're an average person, and these kinds of books are written for average folks, right? I mean, just generally educated folks. That these are not doctoral dissertations made into a book. Anyone can read these books if they just give it a little effort. This is the media that real people, average people, can be informed by. It's no longer newspapers. Newspapers are hyper partisan in most cases, at least in the United States, and I imagine in the UK too. And it's certainly not the internet. There are good things on the internet. In fact, you can find great studies on the internet, and I often do. But that's not what people are looking for, is it?
And you find us on the internet. Very good.
Yep, absolutely. There are good things on the internet. It's just that people tend to gravitate toward the Cardassians, don't they?
Exactly. What they're looking for is a quick hit, a instant gratification. Swipe left, swipe left, swipe left. Is that the right direction? I don't know. I don't do that swiping.
Yeah.
And what we have now is the goldfish attention span. Only they're not going to. Too much work. You've shown a big book. It's got lots of pages. Too much work. No, give me a Twitter or an Instagram feed.
Well, as a teacher, I have to. I don't want to defame the general population, but as a teacher who stands at the coalface every day, I am often dismayed, and maybe that's why I'm a little bit of a, not a pessimist, but I don't have much hope for the human race, because I really don't.
I understand.
Because it is my conviction that only about 2% of the population can function at the level that we are functioning here. I mean, if you just think about reading, any remedial teacher will tell you that if you have 10 kids in a class, 2 of them will find it really easy to read with understanding. 5 of them will struggle, but with a lot of hard work, they will eventually be able to read with understanding within a year. And the rest will probably never be able to read with understanding. And that group of 5 who will eventually be able to read with understanding, they will never find it easy enough so that reading becomes pleasurable to them. Reading will always be hard work for them. And we are not naturally inclined to engage in hard work that we don't find rewarding. And nobody gets paid to read. And just by looking at the facts, that tells me that fewer and fewer people will read, and more people will be swiping through the Kardashians and the 30-second TikTok videos of cats and people throwing ice over their heads and silly things like that. And I know that because I see that every day. And I don't know whether to I veer between severe pessimism and just saying, oh, what.
It's moments like this. She's freezing.
Isn't the solution though humility? Isn't that what we're saying? That people who either are incapable of doing the work as you suggest, or just don't want to do the work, maybe they should have the humility to say, okay, I want to consume. I want to be a super consumer. Okay, that's fine. Just don't vote. Stay out of the conversation, because there are people who want to do the right thing. There are people who want to do the right thing for you too. So why don't you just step out, acknowledge that you don't have the background, you don't have the knowledge, you didn't do the work, you did not do the work, and so find something else to do. Find something else to do. There's no reason why you should be on the internet arguing with people who have done the work or whatever, and trying to take down Lawrence Krause or Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins or any of these folks. Just let people do what they enjoy doing, and let them do what they're qualified to do. In fact, celebrate them.
Can you see that happening? Can you see people self-excluding, thinking I'm too stupid to be able to vote, so I'm not going to do it? Can you see that happening?
Yes. I would welcome that. I would welcome that with open arms.
So in 25 seconds, the message of tonight's show is acknowledge that you are too stupid to vote and just go and do something else.
Well, let's not call it stupidity though, because there are a lot of people who can fix my car where I can't. And it's really a matter of using the right tool for the right job, isn't it? And having the humility to know that you are not the right tool for certain jobs, just as I am not the right tool for certain jobs.
I love that. I love that. Be the right tool for the right job and acknowledge when you are.
Right.
Have you never heard of dogmatism?
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah. And that's the problem with ideology, and that's the problem with religion. It shuts people's minds off, and they're not willing to think through anything enough to have the humility to make those choices. You're absolutely right.
Moments like this makes me remember George Carlin, who said, just think how stupid the average person is, and then realize that 50% of us are more stupid than that.
Yes.
Well, I've enjoyed
But
this.
again, it's more about having it's more about having done the work than it is about stupidity. I think that's where we should fall on at the end here.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. Do the work. Let's do the work, people. Let's do the work. It's not that difficult. It's not that hard.
Or don't, and stay out of the melee.
That's it. And just watch the Free Thought Hour. Then the work has been done for you to a great extent. Yeah, come on, guys.
Don't just watch. Join in. Come here, and we can put your comments on the screen. So I want to promote next week's guest because I've stuck my neck out. I'm in an argument with a professional philosopher who teaches logics at a college somewhere in America. And, well, watch it next week because I'm arguing. No, I'm not going to tell you what I'm arguing because it'll be a spoiler, you know. So no spoilers. You needn't be alerted about any spoilers. Watch next week when you'll see me taking on what's his name, Jason Jewell, and he's promised me $5,000 if I can change his mind.
Wow.
What the hell? Do I get half of that?
So there you go. That's Free Thought Hour next week. Thank you very much, Kenneth. Thank you, Tercia. Thank you, viewers. Future viewers too. Thank you in advance. I'll get your outro ready for us. Here we come. So, thank you very much. Wave goodbye. Here we go. I'll have to edit that